The following is a KPB Media Works production.
Choose your fighter.
What's up, guys? This is Rodimus Prime, and we are back for another episode of KPBCast. Today is an impromptu episode. I didn't know I was going to see him until maybe yesterday, and I want to welcome you guys from Philly's very own Juumani Haskins, aka Maestro. What's going on, man?
Yo, appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Of course, man. Thank you
It's good to be
for
here.
coming in this such short notice and your short availability here. So
Yeah, no problem. I actually didn't have anything planned when I made this trip. So when Ray chipped me, was like, "Yo, you want to do a podcast?" I'm like, "All right, sure." I'd actually had this booked for a while and forgot about it. Because it wasn't tied to like any tournament travel I had planned. I was like, "All right, fine. Like, I'll go to New York in the fall." And then somebody hit me up, was like, "Yo, you want to hang out?" I'm like, "Sure." And then next thing I know, I'm on the website. I'm like, "Why does it keep saying change an existing booking? I want to make a new." And I checked my email. I'm like, "Oh, this has been sitting here for a while." So I decided I got the time off. Might as well come up, see the homies, and just get into foolishness safely, of course.
safely, of course, yes.
Socially distanced foolishness. Wear your masks.
And again, no judgment, but like, and I guess you wasn't thinking about this when you booked it. So like, you know, COVID season, it's not fun for any of us, especially in
Right.
FTC. Is it just something you just need to get away? You just want to get away for a bit?
It has been most of the time. Usually when I'm traveling, like now, I don't travel too often, obviously. On the few occasions that I do, it's always been like for mental health reasons, like just to get some time away to
Right.
clear my head. I actually had like a work cycle that was coming up. So whenever we jump in, we do like a programming cycle that lasts for like a couple weeks. This one was going to be one of our bigger ones. It was going to be our fall after school programming. So this was going to run from October all the way into December, and it was just jam packed. Had a bunch of things lined up. So I'm like, it's going to be a big project. I know I'm going to be home a lot. Let me go out and get some time, clear my head before I jump back into it. Because once we start, it's just like high octane, start to finish, day in, day out. Like I have what I'm doing, but because it's online, like anything can happen. So like say we're scheduled to run
You need
next.
to like just decompress before you jump to all of that.
Exactly.
And again, even with everything that's happened recently, it's totally okay to find a safe getaway.
Yeah.
You know, from all the stress that's going on in all of our lives at the same time right now. But
Definitely.
again, thank you for coming here at such short notice and in your schedule. You know,
absolutely.
to just come and shoot the shit with us, so to speak. Tell us about Juumani. Tell us about my show. If someone were to describe you to someone coming into the community, what would they say about you?
Enigmatic. Very heavy on the charisma now. Beforehand, I kind of kept more to myself. Kind of like a young old head in a sense, just because of my taste in games, what I usually gravitate more towards. Funny, and usually just like standing by my peoples. Like if you see me at a major, if you see me at a tournament, you see me at an event, whatever, I'm cool with like branching out and making friends. But whenever I step in and I see somebody, I'm like, all right, that's my peoples over there. So like they know me as like the kind of go-to guy. I'm like, if I need something, I got him. If I need to talk like old games, or if it's like some random obscure character interaction that's like, have you seen this before? I'm like, yes. I don't remember where, but I can break this down.
Right.
Usually like that. These days most people just know me for wilding out on Twitter and making jokes, which is what I spend a good amount of my time doing when I'm not actually playing, especially now, just sitting at home.
Is that anything to do with the Ovaltine Poppy moniker that's on your Twitter? Like,
Yes,
can you
actually.
is that a spin of Drake's Champagne Poppy kind of thing?
Definitely. So the whole Ovaltine Poppy thing happened with one of my friends. Shout out Xanos. Shout out Kendra. She actually roasted me when we were in an Uber heading to go eat when we were at Evo, and this was 2018, I believe. And I don't remember what exactly I said, and then she just wanted, she's like, Ovaltine complexion ass nigga. And I'm like, wait, but Ovaltine's delicious though. And then the light bulb went on. I'm like, hold on, we got something here. So I think like the next day I went to like play my polls, and I'm just like, all right, I'm just gonna change it. Why not? And I made my Twitter handle Ovaltine Poppy, and it just took off from there. So now that's my Twitter, that's my Steam. I put like Ovaltine as like my team tag in Smash.gg.
Okay.
So it shows up everywhere now. Like it's been a running joke, and it's kind of become a brand. Hopefully I don't get sued.
Nah, probably, but they probably need the exposure. It's not a big thing here,
It's not a big thing
except
anymore.
if you're from a Caribbean family. I'm from a Jamaican family, so Ovaltine as a kid always had the glass jar in the house. That those Sanka rough grains, but they melted into some nice warm milk real quick, and it was
Had
good
the
to go.
orange lid on it.
Yep.
Yeah. See, you know.
I know, definitely. What about Maestro? How did the Maestro moniker?
So the Maestro moniker came from one of my friends in New York. Goes by the name of Rizal. Known him for a couple of years. We've been playing stuff like old KOF, Street Fighter. He was actually one of the guys who first got me into playing on like GGPO and all this stuff. He was like, okay, try this out. Like, if you have an interest in Third Strike or interest in ST, check this. Because we tried playing Street Fighter 4, we tried playing it on console and it didn't work out. And then when I finally got a 360, his Red Ring.
Oh, yeah.
And then we tried, playing online. I'm like, what if we tried on PC? My PC couldn't handle it. His could. So we played with like all stages off. So it was just a black screen. I'm like, it works, but this isn't fun. So we had to figure out something else to do.
Right.
So he got me into playing like Third Strike and ST and Alpha 2. Pretty much like all the old classes. We were playing on GGPO and Super Arc. And I remember he like looked at one of the pictures I uploaded on Facebook, and it was just a bunch of hats. Like I was heavy in the snapbacks when I was younger. And he came and was like, yo, so what's with all this? Like, you the snapback maestro now? And I'm like, I guess. And I was like, wait a minute. That kind of has a ring to it. So I figured, why not go with snapback maestro for the tag? And then I eventually dropped snapback around, I want to say end of 2012, going into 2013. That's when I dropped it, and it just became maestro.
Okay. Sounds dope. You're one of the first Philly heads we've had on the podcast. So for people that don't know, never been to Philly, never been to the biggie events and stuff, but maybe involved in the fighting game community. How are you guys as a community different from like other communities that you've been around?
So Philly is different because we're a smaller community. Despite us having, majors and everything, hosted in our backyard, we're not as like widespread as like New York community would be, or when they talk about like some of the places in Cali, some of the hotspots over there. But we're very tight knit. We go to bat for each other all the time, even when we're at each other's throats, whether it's arguing about a game or competition's getting heated. There's rivalry. When it comes down to it, like Philly will support Philly. Like we have our own back. Like we got each other. Even when people try and seem like it doesn't, it's now gotten to the point where we have so many things going on. Like before COVID hit, we were having multiple places doing locals. Local host was doing stuff. They were having the fighting game tournaments. They were having the reversal, the monthlies, the weekly sessions, all that. There were still other people doing stuff like DBFZ guys, Dragon Ball guys that were running their own stuff. Shadow Royalty had an event they were doing.
Shout out to Shadow Royalty.
Yeah, shout out to Shadow Royalty. They've been doing great work with not just DBZ, but also with Grand Blue. They've been running like online events for that now since everybody's at home. Those have been going well. So Philly for the first time, at least from what I'm seeing, it's now we're like becoming more than just Street Fighter and Marvel. Because when I started, that's all that was really there. Right. We had people that played other games. Everybody kind of like dabbled in a little bit of everything. And that goes back from when I started around like into 2010, going into 2011. It was very much we have people who play everything, but Philly has always been known for Marvel. Like that was the big game in Philly, where even if you didn't play, you still played a little bit, just because everybody had it. And I got in actually with Street Fighter. So like a lot of other people, I'm pretty much an 09er. Started watching tournaments, 2009, 2010, got into a SF4. Was always in the fighting games. I knew of the community. I knew like there had to be a scene for this. I saw some of the stuff that was getting put on YouTube. But it was just, at the time I was too young to actually go to tournaments. Right. So it was just me being a stream monster. And then I finally found like, through an anime group actually, an anime club that I went to at CCP, one of those guys told me, oh, like we play here, on like Fridays, like I go to this spot. And then that's how I met them. They linked up, they played at like Temple. And then I know like they had Drexel sessions in the summer. So that was really my entrance to the fighting game community, was kind of through like the anime scene and finding like the guys who took it a bit more serious. And they just kind of brought me along.
There's always those, you find a small group that plays casually. And then you find one or two heads in the group that's like, we're a little more serious about it than everybody else. Yeah. And then you find out where they go, and then where they get the info, you follow them, and then you realize a whole other world of people that do it on this level. It's not just like, because the stereotype is like, for me growing up, we play in the arcades, it was like us playing, and then like the stereotype was the Asians. You know that
Yeah.
any Asians that knew how to really play like that was like, yo, you know, I used to be told, oh, you play like the Asians. You know, I'm like, I just played the game with that. I'm no, you know,
Yeah.
stop stereotyping.
Like I'm playing the game. I'm doing moves like like they figured if you could do a combo that was more than two, it's like, oh, you play like the Asians.
Yeah.
And I'd heard that a few times. I didn't hear it much,
Right.
just because I kind of missed out on that arcade era.
Right.
Despite having legendary University Pinball 40th Street in my hometown. 40th Street was wild. There's a lot of stories that have been shared about the location. For me, it's a bit different because I came into it later. But I would hear like the way my brother would talk about it. Like, he'd come from high school. And so I'm like, oh yeah, we went to 40th Street or whatever after school. And my mom was like, how long did you stay there? Like, make sure you got on the train before it got dark, stuff like that. Because while it wasn't necessarily a bad area, there was a whole bunch of stuff like going on. Like, obviously, it's Philly. It's University City, but it's Philly.
We definitely had the same thing in arcades here, like when I was growing up. Yeah, unfortunately, most arcades do attract some sort of bad element.
Right.
Especially depending on where they are. I've definitely been in arcades and bodegas when things not so savory have went down.
Oh, yeah.
That's just part of the territory for most of us, in our neighborhoods where we grew up. You touched on being a young guy. How old are you now?
Right now I'm 24.
So you were in the community, was it 13?
Probably around 13, 14,
Yeah,
just getting into like really being online, looking at stuff like Shoryuken, like reading forums, trying to find out where stuff was going on in Philly, but not actually being able to go.
How were you when you entered your first local? Or did you just go into like the bigger scene right away?
No, so actually I'd gone to a tournament they held at like a small little anime convention called Mayhem Madness. I think it was a J1 joint.
Okay.
And this was 2011. This was like late 2011 or early 2012. And that was when like I first started to like go and like enter stuff. I think the first actual tournament I entered, like when I like really started playing fighting games, was off of a whim. I went to Inochicon in 2010, and that was in Center City, Philadelphia, and they had a TVC tournament. And I'd never played the game before. I'd watched it. And they're like, well, it's bring your own controller, and they didn't have a controller. It's like, you could play on a Wiimote, and I'm like, is that legal? He's like, I don't know. So I ended up playing on a Wiimote. Not a whole lot of people entered, and I beat one person. He's like, all right, so this is finals. You versus Rogue Yoshi. Who? And I'm like, I didn't know this guy at the time. I'm just like, why does this name sound familiar? And I remember, I think I saw it on like the SRK tag or something. And then like we sat down, he played. I think he played Tekken Man Blade. I remember playing Tekken Man like, and he like threw the like the little lance or whatever. I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. He's like, dog, it happens. But then, you talk and you explain a couple of things. He's like, so, when it comes at this angle, this is when you can push block. This is what, when you see advanced guard, that's push blocking.
Right.
So you press the, and he like explained a couple of things to me.
So that's the first time you had someone actually explain to you things in the game?
Yeah, that was the first time I had somebody like break down mechanics, and not just what they are, but how to use them and when. Because it's like, you can read guides all day. I'm like, this is used for this. This is your. That was the first time somebody had like sat down and said like, oh, here's when you want to use it. Here's why. Here's why this character is really good. I think at the time I was running like Ryu and Batsu and like Ryu and Alex, just because I didn't know much, but I'm like, I know these two characters.
Right.
So I tried to make that work. And we played. He was real cool. Dapped up, left. I think I got second place, so I got like a $20 gift card for whatever they had in the merch store. I don't even remember if I bought anything. I think I said just give me the $20 and call it a day.
Okay.
So that was the first actual tournament I entered, even though it was a con tournament. The first local was Mayhem Madness, and I went for, at the time, Street Fighter Cross Tekken, which was, I guess, kind of halfway a pre-release thing. At the time, someone was like, we have it, we can run a side bracket for it. Obviously, we can't do a pot, but they just ran. I played a couple rounds of that, got smoked, and then I think in Street Fighter 4, I don't even remember. I think I got like 17th. Like I got cooked. Like the person I ran into, I think I ran into Julian Robinson, who's like one of the old like EMP heads like in Philly. He's an OG, like Marvel, old Street Fighter games, like all of that. I think I ran into him, and then I think it was a player from Delaware. I don't think it was one of the DCB guys. but they would just it
This
was
is Delaware. I mean, they're close by. So.
yeah, they're close by, so like they would come to like locals and stuff, and that's really like how I got to meet like more of the people in like the tri-state area, like Philly, New Jersey heads would come out, the Delaware heads would come out, and then from there, that's actually when I met Big E. It was at Mayhem Madness. He came down to like the Rotunda is on 40th and Walnut. And then 40th and Spruce, where the arcade is right there. So I think a couple of guys had actually left like before everything was like all set up and run. People got there early to like register. They went down and they started playing like a couple of rounds of Marvel 2 or whatever, and they came back. And then somebody said, "Oh, yo, Eric's gonna be here in like 10 minutes. He's finishing up some stuff and he's gonna come over." And he was telling people about Summer Jam they had coming up, and that was actually my first major. It was Summer Jam 6. So I met Biggie, I shook his hand. I was like, hey, like I'm following the tournament scene and everything. I've seen like some of the SRK posts. He was like, oh, word, like where you from? Like I'm from Philly, like just starting to go to tournaments and everything. He's like, yo, we got one coming up in August. Come check out Summer Jam. If you got time, come through. It's gonna be down to Sheraton this weekend. Went, and that was when I met some like, I think I met like a couple of like big players that were there. And I was kind of like starstruck. With that being my first like big major, like I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know who I was gonna see.
At that point, were you familiar with names?
I was familiar with names. Yeah,
people, you were watching those streams and hearing about.
I was,
players.
And because that was all I had at the time, I was definitely a stream monster. Like even though I wasn't really chatting, like I was sitting there. I was the guy that would like come home after work. Because I had an after school job, and being in cyber school actually helped with that. So it's like I had my own computer. I was used to like doing stuff, and I had a lot of free time. So if I wasn't trying to figure out something like playing, like just sitting in training mode, and like trying to like learn the ins and outs of the game, I was watching streams or I was watching YouTube videos. I was watching footage. Like I wanted as much content as I could absorb. Like early on, I was definitely like a knowledge sponge. So like anything that was going on, so I'd watch everything. I'd watch. Back when it was called Big 2, I would watch Big 2. I would watch 8 on the Break. I would watch Wednesday Night Fights. So that was always my routine, Wednesdays. I'd come home from work after I was done with school and everything. Turn on Next Level, watch Big 2, and once Big 2 was on, flip over, watch Wednesday Night Fights.
Yeah.
And I remember back when Wednesday Night Fights didn't even have like the full overlay, like you couldn't tell what the score was.
Right.
So I'd tune in, I'd be like, oh, Keno's playing, like I want to see, because I wanted to learn as much about Balrog as I could, because that character,
I remember,
that character gave me so much trouble. And then it's like, I see them around, I'm like, all right, great, so he's probably gonna come. Oh, that was it. So it was like early days of streaming, just trying to like find and watch as many things as I could. It didn't matter what game it was, Street Fighter, Marvel, Tekken, KOF. It was fighting games, I wanted to watch it. So that's how I became familiar with names, and then like running into some of the guys like online. Just before I started going to like in-person tournaments, I would always join like when they did the SRK open lobbies. And they would have like
I remember they would stream the open lobbies.
Yeah, the stream
open lobby
lobbies.
Open 24 hours a day.
And
sometimes
like,
it'd be empty, no one's playing. Sometimes it'd be like full, and like someone's running like a win streak on there, and like I remember.
Like I remember they do like the win streak challenges. Like, hey, if you like break a 20 streak, you win like a gift card. If you do this, if you get to 50, you can win like a TE, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I would always try. I wouldn't get it, but I would always try. And like I think that's how people recognize me, because back then I used to register as Satoru Makina, which was my Xbox Live gamer tag. So people were like, wait, aren't you? I'm like, yeah, we played like a couple of weeks ago, like on the in the lobbies. And that's really like kind of how I got my name out there. And then I think I switched to Maestro after that, but I still had it on like registration and everything. So like when people saw it, they're like, oh, like, yeah, I know this guy. So that was really just kind of like how I got, I say recognized, was just like playing the online lobbies, playing the SRK Live, like the Peaceful J streams, all that stuff. And then when I first started like really going, I kept the same tag, because I'm like, well, I might as well, like if people understand like, oh, well, I've played this guy before. But yeah, Summer Jam 6, that was the first time I'd gone to like a bigger tournament and I'd seen like names. So it's like, I walk in, I see like, oh, there's Chris G, there's K-Brad, there's Crazy Joe, there's Yipes, there's Jago, like all these guys that I see like, from streams, and all that. And I was just like, damn, like I was started like as a teenager, I'm like, damn, like they're really right there in front of me. Because for me, somebody who didn't see like competitive gaming a lot until like I got older, like for them, those were like the larger than life figures for me at the time. Like, so I saw them kind of in the same way that I would see, an athlete, or you see somebody on TV. Like even if it was just logos, I'm like, oh shoot, like you're actually here. But everybody was cool, dap people up. It was like, hey, so like I play such and such, I'm from here. People like showed me a couple ropes. I think I I don't even think I'd entered anything at Summer Jam 6. I think like I showed up to spectate and I played in like a little side tournament. I played in like the retro room and some stuff like that. Just tried to take in as much as I could. Obviously got beat up, but I learned a lot. And from there, like after that, I got the bug and I was hooked. I wanted to go to one like as soon as possible.
That's what's up. That's a good intro for you to get into fighting games and stuff. I feel like we have another problem. I wouldn't call it a problem, but
right.
In New York, I feel like unless the event is brought to us, we have a number of people that don't travel to events in New York that are really good, right?
Yeah.
Is that the case in Philly? Philly has big events,
right?
So you have, and you as Philly and the surrounding areas, they go to Essington, which is right outside Philly. You have 3-4 events a year, right? You have a lot of people in the community that don't go to these events.
We have a lot of people who go to the local events. We have a lot of people who go to the big E events, who go to like the whenever they do like summer jams, the NECs, the Winter Brawls, they go to those. The thing is, they might be at one and not the other, but something I learned feels like pretty much everybody works.
Right.
So that was the thing that I figured out early on. Like I saw in this mic, it's real life. Everybody has a job, and that was a thing for a while, and it still is. Like people, they gotta do what they gotta do.
Of course. Yeah.
So it would be like
we work,
Yeah.
I work a 40-hour a week, well 35. Work week. I work a regular work week, 9 to 5, so to say. For me, it's just about making time, right?
Right.
I have the luxury of working on Monday through Friday, weekends off, so it's a little easier for me.
Yeah.
Some people don't have that luxury, but the thing is, like that I've seen, and that's kind of like the law. At least with New York City, we have a lot of players that are really good that don't travel.
Philly has the same thing.
Okay.
Philly,
so it's not a New York thing. It's
not just a New York thing. Every community has it, I think, to an extent.
But hold on,
we're right there.
We're right there. Is it something about majors that people are hesitant?
I think people do get intimidated a bit. I definitely got intimidated when I went. I think it made it easier for me with it being like right in my backyard. Right. So I didn't have to go through the whole thing like, oh, like I got to book a train ticket or a bus or a plane or whatever. I don't have to fly over. Right. It was just, I catch this bus goes there. Get there, just make sure I'm home before it gets too late, even though it's a weekend, so my parents don't worry. But I think my dad actually ended up like picking me up, dropping me off, and asking. I remember like when they came to pick me up, I was like, "So how was it?" Like, great. I'm going back tomorrow. Like tomorrow, I'm like, yeah. So like today is like pools, and I'm explaining the whole thing to them. I don't think they're really like too into it.
Of course.
But like I saw like they supported me, and I saw the gears turning. The only thing was that was actually what stopped me from traveling for a while. Was just one, being young, and two, was just always put school first.
Of course, yeah.
So with Philly, a lot of it was like there's a lot of old heads, there's a lot of OGs that helped out, but everybody in Philly was doing something. Like everybody was either working or in school, so we made it when we can. Usually we would make the big E events. Everybody would try for those because we knew when they were.
Yeah.
Like we'd have enough advance notice for that, but everything else, it was like we kind of got this stigma of like, oh, Philly doesn't travel.
Right.
And that was like we had to deal with that for like years.
I think it goes to all of Northeast.
Yeah,
because we get that about New York too. New York, they say we don't leave the coast.
Yeah.
So we'll go as far as final round, maybe a CEO or what. You never usually have big contingent. You have big West Coast contingents.
Yeah.
That'll come to the East Coast tournament.
Yeah.
Especially if something serious is on the line.
That was the first time I met West Coast players. Right. I think a couple of them came to Summer Jam, and then it was NEC at the end of the year. That was where I met like most of the West Coast heads because that was like the big one at the end of the year.
That one NEC, I think the first one that where they had to change venues and they went to
Holiday Inn.
Not Holiday Inn. King of Prussia, the Valley Forge.
Yeah, Valley Forge.
First year there was a lot of
West Coast
players. It wasn't anything special because I think Capcom Cup had just ended. So there wasn't really playing for anything, it wasn't a pro tour points, but I guess they just wanted something to do.
Yeah.
And they came out there. And it was not just West Coast. You had Chicago,
Midwest
came through. Everyone came through. It was like every region was there. I guess it was something they just wanted to do. They didn't want to come out, which is great. But I feel like the stigma that we have as Northeast players is that we don't support a lot of national events.
I've heard it.
And it's funny because going back to the question, New York has a thing about not going to events, and like we have Andy, shouts to Andy in DTN, him trying to be one of the first TOs to have a constant New York scene going.
Yeah, have a major
in terms of men. And let me just say for the record, for all the crap that he gets, you guys don't know what it takes to have one of these going. So I always commend Andy for trying to do his best to bring that to the New York City people. But the running joke with DTN is that they call it Next Level Plus Ultra because it's basically all next level heads come and they play, and even players that don't go to next level anymore because they're from New York, they'll come out. Like I think I saw Reese.
Yeah, I haven't heard that name in years.
Yeah, and Reese is like, what? He pops up. He hasn't been playing, so stuff like that. Shouts to Reese.
Yeah,
doing good. So, but you guys have it in your backyard, literally, 3-4 times a year. And I guess it's the same thing. Is when we can make it, we make it.
Yeah, I felt spoiled by it. I'm like, damn, like I got Winter Brawl, like with 3 games. Like if I want to meet more Tekken heads, we got this. Want to meet more DOA guys.
I used to hate we talk and I go, oh, you want to make it to Winter? Nah, I'm busy. I'm like, brother, you down the street, man. I mean, and I get it. You're busy. You know?
So that year, when I think around the time we first met, it was like what, that Summer Jam, right? Like in 2012 or was it 2015? Yeah. So at the time, I had 2 jobs during school then. And I worked at Lid, so I worked weekends. So that's why I was like, if I knew when something was coming up, it would be easier for me to take off. But usually, like, because those were the only hours I had, if it was a weekend, I was bodied.
Right.
So it's like I could make it to like Friday sessions if I was lucky, if I didn't have work. And then senior year came along and everything changed. I was just like, okay, now it's like you got schoolwork, you got to like really like take serious. And I've always been like a serious student. It was like, do this, then you have to do college applications and all this stuff. And I made time for what I could. Once it got down to it, I think like before the end of the year, like after we'd had Winter Brawl, I was just like burnt out. And I'm just like, I finally had a weekend off, and I was like, all right, yeah, I'm gonna go to the sessions, I'm gonna grind. Summer Jam's coming up at the end of this. I'm finally gonna grind and do all this. I think I slept the whole weekend because I was burnt out.
You're just grinding. You're young, and I think it's good that you're young, putting in all this work. Which is reflected in your college studies. We'll get to that a little later. But yeah, I always known you to be a grinder. That being said, you're probably looked at as one of the people in a tournament that causes nightmares in terms of booking stuff because you play like 20 games in the tournament.
I condensed it a lot.
You did condense it a lot.
I did. I used to.
A couple years ago, you was playing everything.
I was playing everything. I was everywhere. I would play like 2 of the new games. I would play whatever game just came out because everybody else was playing it. Yeah. I would play like at least 3 retro games. Like I would enter ST. I would enter Alpha 2. And I didn't see it a whole lot. Like at the time, I would try to enter Marvel 2 whenever they had it. If it didn't fill up, of course. I would try and get on there. And then, like, basically whatever else was around. Like, even if it was something I barely played on, like, GGP, I'm like, oh, cool, they had this. Let me sign up for it. The big reason for that is I had not, like, super strict parents. It was always, make sure your schoolwork's done. But until, like, my senior year, where it's like my grades were high and it was like I was an asynchronous learner. So while I had online classes, it was like, I didn't have to go. I'd been campaigning for it for like years. I'm like, my grades are this high. Like, let me just be asynchronous. Like, this will, open more opportunities for me. And I was more concerned about like, hey, like I can work more hours, put money in my pocket and save up if I do this. Didn't get that until senior year. So the whole thing, why I was so heavy on playing everything and as much as I could when I got the majors was because I wasn't allowed to play during the week. I was a weekend warrior only. So as soon as the weekend came, if I wasn't working, if I was just at home, I was just grinding fighting games the whole time. So I'd probably wake up in the morning, get breakfast, do whatever it is I got to do, and then I would just be on Street Fighter. And like Marvel with my friends for like hours, just trying to learn as much as I could, get as many games as I could, see if there are any lobbies going on, were there any streams going on that weekend, was there anything I could watch. Because I had to condense it to the weekend, I tried to get in as much as I could, and that was the approach I took to majors. Like I got a whole weekend to indulge in pretty much every fighting game I've been playing online with actual people. Let me get in while I can.
Okay.
So that was why I entered everything. And I like a bit of everything. I'm one of those people, I will give everything a shot once. And if I like it, even if I don't compete in it, I'll always be down to play it.
Right. You're just that guy. You're just a general fighting game fan.
Exactly. That's the thing. I play fighting games because I like fighting games. Right. As much as we complain about them and they get on our nerves, I wouldn't be playing them if I didn't love them. So I would be down to play sets in pretty much anything.
Favorite fighting game all time? One. Gotta pick it.
I gotta pick one?
One.
Favorite fighting game all time.
Whether it's the one that brought you to the dance, the one that you can play over and over again, no matter how you're feeling, no matter what you're doing. What is your over? If not game, series. Let's keep it at that. I won't regulate to a game.
Okay.
But I'll regulate to a series.
All-time series, if I'm going to have to go, I'm going to have to go with what brought me in. I'm going to have to go with Street Fighter.
Okay. Respect it.
So if I had to pick that one, I was probably going to say Alpha 2.
Alpha 2, yes. That's a great game to play over and over.
Alpha 2 I played before ST and like most of the other retro stuff. That was what like really got me in. Granted, I didn't know too much about it.
Right.
But that was just like, that was the one I could play for like hours when I was a kid. And then as I got older and learned more about the game and actually started playing it, I could still play it for hours.
Right. That was a great game. I love playing Alpha 2. I spent a lot of time on that game, actually. People that know me know I'm a KOF fan first and foremost. But I also know that Street Fighter brought 99% of us to the dance in some form of fashion. You know, and that franchise will always get respect from me. And yeah, Alpha 2 was one of my favorites of all the Street Fighter titles. So
Alpha 2 was like the first game I thought like I knew how to play, and I played Rizzo online and he smoked me. Like absolutely, like it was bad.
So okay, so let me. And I asked you with this question. So you're on the cusp of getting to this community. Just before you get into that, were you kind of considered the best in your circle? Were you one of those?
Not really, no.
But you played.
I played. I was the guy like at our local anime club at CCP. No, obviously younger than everybody. It's a community college.
Well, you're young guy. Yeah.
My older brother told me about it, and those were his friends that he had from like high school and kept up with.
So they beat you mostly.
They beat me, and then I noticed when like I started hanging around with like the guys that started taking it more seriously, and they told me about like where they played, and then I went back. Then I started beating them, and then I went to tournaments. So I kind of hovered around like that mid level for a good long while. And I remember that I was feeling myself a little bit when Vanilla Marvel had dropped, because I had like a win streak going, but it was literally like day 2 of the game.
Right, of course.
And I think the team I was playing was like, I picked like Magneto, Dante, and Amy. Just because Amaterasu, just because I like the comic.
I'm just thinking about the competition as the game evolved. It isn't bad.
It isn't bad. I didn't know.
You have weaknesses, but you didn't know that.
I didn't know that. I'm just like, yo, like all 3 of them are in a game at the same time.
Right,
I have to.
Yeah.
Like everybody picked Wolverine, Dante, and Deadpool first week of the game. Like who could blame you? That was the first. Believe it or not, that was probably the first example of like in-person Salt. Because this dude was like, oh yeah, like I've been playing it, I got my copy at midnight. Like I was hype. I've been playing it this whole time. And we ran the set. I was like, yo, like win 3, lose 3, next person. When we had a bunch of people. And it was just like, you win 3, you stay on. Like you lose 3, like you got to get up. I think I had like a 4-set streak. So like 12, I was on like 12 wins. And like he came back in the rotation. He's like, yo, so you're just going to keep spamming Disruptor again? I'm like, I mean, it's working. Getting hit.
You're getting hit. Block, fool.
Right. That's how I felt. I'm like, block.
Those are people that can't play when you say that. Now,
and he wasn't bad. Like, shout out to Jex. Jex, if you're watching this, if you see this, like, that actually kind of sparked that fire. I'm like, oh, like, so this is what it's like when people complain about getting hit by X, Y, and Z. But that kind of, like, wanted me to take him. I'm like, well, if I find out how simple it is that this works, I'm like, there's got to be other stuff I can pick up on, too. And that's when I started watching YouTube videos.
So you had the fire spark. When was the first time you got humbled? Like really humbled, like made you feel like you had no idea what you were doing this entire time? So every player goes through this.
Everybody says don't take online too seriously. And at the time I didn't, just because it's like I knew like, all right, we're playing on emulators. It is what it is. Like we weren't even playing on GGPO. We were playing on Super Arcade. Right. It was somebody. I think I was playing Third Strike. And that's
the game that'll humble you real quick. You don't know what you're doing.
And it was just like, I've watched like some of the like Japanese tournament footage. I've watched like, obviously I watched the Daigo Parry. That was kind of like, oh, so this is what it's like when it's like in full swing. I'd watch that and I'm sitting there, I'm like, I don't really know like what I'm doing. I don't know the ins and outs of the game. I'm just like, Alex has the headbutt where he reaches out and grabs. Just see that, his back fierce. Yeah, I'm just saying, I'm like, oh, cool. Like if I hit this, like I have time to like think about my next move rather than automatically having it. Right. I didn't know how unsafe it actually was.
Very unsafe move.
So Muhammad Rizal punished it every time. He was playing Remy.
Oh yeah.
So he didn't even like bring out like, because I'd known him for playing Ryu, because he did that in every game. Like ST played Ryu.
I think you can dash up crouching heavy on that.
He dashed, crouch fierce,
yeah.
health
Launched.
bar, and of course he picked Super 2, Rising Rage flat.
Yeah.
Every time I did, I'm like, all right, maybe if I just wait and okay. Third strike, that set, I think we played like 20 games, and I just like kept like getting smoked. And he's like, "Come on, man, like walk, like use normals more." I'm just like, I'm still trying to figure this out.
Right.
This is like before like I really get into it, but that was the first time like I got like humble where I know I'm like, okay, I don't know nearly as much about this game as I thought I did. And at that time, I didn't even have like a controller. I was playing on a keyboard.
Oh, okay.
Like, I was playing on a laptop, trying to like figure out like what to do.
Are you a hitbox guy? You ever use a hitbox?
I've used one. I tried it. It doesn't feel bad, but for me, it's like once I went from using the keyboard and then finally playing on console and all these other things, getting a pad and then playing from pad and going to stick, it's hard for me to go to hitbox. Like, stick is always going to be what I'm used to. Unless for some reason, like, God forbid I get like a crazy injury or something. Right. And then like the hitbox is just like more comfortable. I have to use it. But so far, I like it. I don't think I would switch.
Okay.
I think maybe down the line I would get one just to have one and just be like.
I want just to have one because I have like a couple of sticks at home
and be able to play on like as many different things as possible. Because I don't want to. My other thing is I don't like going into tournaments unprepared.
Oh my god, that's another show. I would be calling out people if I had a show on unpreparedness in fighting game community. It's like you're going to a gunfight without a gun, bro. What is that?
I had to learn, like, I got a stick.
And top players do this. I'm not going to say names, but top players
bro, can I borrow your stick?
Get on a plane, come to an event, and say, yo, can I borrow it? Like, no, brother. No, you cannot borrow my stick. Where is your gun?
And I was that guy at tournaments beforehand. Like when I first started going, because I didn't really have this. Like I had my controller, but then I found out the tournaments run on PS3. Right. And this is before all the Cronus stuff like came out, before we had converters. So I'd have to ask like my friends, like, hey, can I borrow this?
And that's different. You
it was people I knew, like local guys.
I have complete strangers. I'm like, and I don't know how you play. I feel I'm very controlled on my equipment. Mm-hmm. What if you get salty? What if you pull a Sanford next level? I'm
like, you wanna pay for this?
You gonna pay for that rolling button that's going down the street right now?
You're gonna hope we got a vendor I can get this fixed to get a new one right then and there.
Oh, what's the name? Gun.
Yeah, Gummo.
Gummo, yeah, Matthew. Yeah.
Shout out to Gummo.
Shout out to that guy. He fixed my stick a couple of times on the fly. Like he took it the night before, in the morning I had it. I'm like, that's awesome to have at an event. Yeah, it's so underrated too. Like,
but yeah, going back to your original Third Strike. That set I played that was the first set where I really got humbled. I'm like, okay, there's so much more I have to learn, and I'm like, I'm gonna have to start playing on something else.
And did it make you change your whole outlook on how you play fighting games in general?
It did, because it made me realize I'm like, just because something does the most damage doesn't mean it's good.
And that was my issue. I was always the kid growing up.
All my combos the heavy button. Yep. All my combos started with jump roundhouse.
Light buttons for what?
Well, I want to do medium. Medium doesn't do damage.
They have a purpose, and you don't learn it until you get to that level. Like, every button accessible to you has a purpose, and you have to use it. Yeah. So,
because he showed me, he's like, okay, so think of it like this. Because he brought up the wiki. He was like, roundhouse, 120 damage, right? Cool. Big damage, punishable. You have to jump in to hit that. If I block it, I punish you with medium into this special. That's 250. He's like, think of it as something faster, something that's more safe,
or something that's just available to you.
Something that's available to you.
There's punishes that aren't available to you if you're only using heavy buttons.
Exactly. He's like, think of him like, get your that was the thing he told me. He's like, big damage is cool,
but get
consistent damage and
possible.
Knowing to get your damage is better.
Right.
He's like, and knowing sometimes not getting damage is actually good. It's just like, if you reset the situation, okay, cool. What are they gonna do?
Right.
Now they have to play it. He's like, he broke down stuff to me so much. Like, I got to credit him with a lot of the stuff. Like, before I even started going to locals, like, he was the guy who, like, really got me into fighting games.
Right.
Just finding, I think it was, like, a random, like, ad on, like, Shoryuken, and then he added me on Facebook, and, like, we started messaging back and forth. And then we started playing. So, like, yeah, definitely shout out to Rizzo. I gotta credit him. He was the guy who, like, humbled me, but then, like, kept me going in the scene and, like, just going above me. He's like, so now he's like, so now that you've played Third Strike, how does Third Strike feel now? And I was like, bro, I gotta be honest, completely different. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. He's like, that's fine. He's like, now's the time to learn. So he became one of my boys. Just like in and out constantly, like whether it was Third Strike, ST if I had questions, if it was about a character or something. If it was something I didn't know how to look up, because at the time I didn't know how to lab, he would explain stuff to me.
Right.
And that's really what took off. So once I had that, that's really was like, okay, now I need to go further down the rabbit hole and then look up as many things and as many games as I can.
Who are your favorite players in the community? Just to watch?
Just to watch?
Yeah.
So it's funny because I always considered myself as like, I like the defensive style. So I think my all-time favorite player, John Choi.
Okay.
John Choi was somebody I watched a lot of when I was coming up, finding footage, like, and it wasn't like current stuff. So this is like I'm watching like archives of like Evo 2007, and it was watching him in multiple games too. So I was watching him like play ST, I was watching him play CVS, and I tried to early on. I tried to pattern my game after his.
Right.
I watched him a lot.
I gotta say, we had a couple people on the show, mostly East Coast people. And they all mentioned John Choi, so that's the story, the level of respect. Yeah, we
big respect for John Choi.
We rivals East and West, but we have respect for your West Coast guys, especially players like John Choi, because you're often mentioned, especially by people who are young and coming into the community when you're considered an OG. And at this point, you're an OG. You're young, but you're an OG. You pulled the 10-year. I can't call someone doing 10 years of anything not an OG.
Damn.
Okay.
Like it's set in now. It's like, wow, I really have been here a minute.
You're young and you're an OG. You've been around.
It feels weird.
It feels weird. You know the time you come into the community is different than the time now.
Oh,
and
definitely.
You watch things change. You watch people also grow around you as players and competitors and people. You're not the only one. Like we've watched you grow, but you've watched other people grow too as well.
Saying it's like I'm in that mode now where it's like I'm kind of paying it back, and I'm watching newer players in Philly come up and going through that experience that I did.
Right.
And it's great to see. Like favorite players, like there are guys in Philly now who are some of my favorites, like MJ. Shout out to MJ, another guy I work with. He plays, and he was originally on state. He switched to Hitbox. He's a Vega player, played Street Fighter 5. One of the nicest guys I've ever met. He's one of my favorite players to watch. Always been a fan of watching like Chris G, Dominion, the old standbys. I loved watching Aqua Silk back in the day. He was one of my favorite players to watch. I like watching Art, like watching Justin.
I remember I was playing a set with a teammate a while back. It had been like 2014, earlier than that, probably like 2013. And it was member we had on our team. I was playing Geef and he was playing Viper. Yeah. And Silk came into the chat, like just watching. We had a set going.
Yeah.
And I was hyped. I was like, yes, I was so, because I was a big Geef fan and Geef player in 4 between Silk and then later on Snake Eyes.
Snake Eyes is another favorite.
Snake Eyes, Van Geef. I watched all those guys.
The standing 720 on a pad.
Yo, standing 720 period still.
It's period.
Like I think about. I don't know if you watch any of the Canada Cups.
Yeah.
Do you remember the reverse OCV?
Ooh.
That Snake Eyes did against the whole. I think it was second team USA.
I think it was USA 2.
Yeah. And they were West Coast guys.
Mm-hmm.
And
so they had a Team USA East Coast and a Team USA West.
They had like two or three USA teams that year, and
they showed out that year. Like a lot of guys came out.
They showed out, and I remember like it was like he was the last one. He was the last on the team, and he went up first against Ricky Ortiz. Great player, by the way. Great all around player. Much respect for her.
Yeah, Ricky. She's definitely another one of my favorites. Definitely love watching.
Always watching like how smart she is when she plays, and I remember like. She made what's his name, Rufus,
yeah.
At the time, and I just remember like he's just standing in neutral, and Rufus does not jump without a dive kick, right? There's a dive kick right in front of Snake Eyes. Snake Eyes pulls out 720. He wasn't moving. He wasn't moving. He was probably buffering.
Yeah,
he was probably buffering, but he wasn't moving.
But you couldn't see it.
You couldn't see it. And I was like. Like and like the whole place blew up when they saw the 720 come out because he missed the dive kick and landed in front of him, and like the whole place lost it, and from that momentum he ran through the whole team.
And from that I've got because I'm so used to watching things in sequence. That was a big thing about Street Fighter 4, where it's usually like if I see one move I know what's coming next, unless like they FADC or something. When I saw that and Ricky missed the dive kick, I'm like, okay, she's gonna do like short. She's gonna go for the reset, maybe a throw. Mm-hmm. And then 7th.
Nobody expected because of the nature of the move.
Nobody. The nature of the move. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, Can you get that as an input error? Did he mean to do that?
There's a way to do it. It's just very hard. But it's kind of buffering a bunch of half circle motions.
Yeah.
And he masked it pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
It's something in your mind you want to do, but execution-wise, it's damn near impossible. Right? In your mind, you wish, in the day of all days, someone lands in front of you when a 720 come out.
I tried to do it immediately after the stream was over. I remember watching it, and then I watched it, and I was like, all right, that's it for the night, guys. We'll see you tomorrow. And as soon as it was over, I turned on my Xbox. I'm like, how?
Dude.
How?
I looked up so many tutorials. I probably pulled it off once or twice in practice out of like a million times. So it's hard. And
I'm going to tell y'all now, we could make an entire other episode of me just going off listing my favorite players. Like, from being a content junkie when I was younger, it's a lot. And then, like, the Japanese players, like, I've always liked watching Haitani.
Oh, man.
Nemo.
My favorite player, especially with Makoto. I used to love his Makoto in 4. Like,
his Makoto's he's damn good at Vampire Savior, too.
Yeah. Yeah. But I was a huge fan of Makoto in 4 because of him.
Oh, yeah. He made me like that character.
Yeah.
Who else? Shoot, Momochi, Tokido. Like, it's... The list of names is ridiculous. One of these days, I'll probably sit down and actually make a list, and it'll be like
probably like a God's episode.
A God's episode. Also, shout out to Sanford. Sanford has always been one of my favorite players to watch.
Always has my respect as a player. A long tenure history. Not many people that don't know Sanford. I mean, not that I know him. I don't know him
right
personally. We know each other from back in the day, but we're never close.
Right.
He was a big Tekken player.
Yeah.
Before anything. Like, when I met him, he was playing Tekken 3. Back in the day. So, that's how far he goes back. He's always been a fighting game fan. We end up becoming, like, the Sagat main in 4. His Marvel 2 history.
Oh, yeah.
The Santhrax days and stuff like that. So, very decorated, well-respected player,
Yeah, Santhrax, Yipes, all like the New York heads that, like, I'd found footage watching, like, in the Marvel 2 days. And then, the early days of Street Fighter 4, like... All those guys, they're just phased, and I watch so much of them. Like, I respect the OGs, like the guys from Game 4. I've butted heads with them a couple of times on various issues, some game related, some not. It is what it is, but it was always, and they stay consistent too. Like, even the guys that don't play, like, don't compete right now, they could easily give you a run for your money any day of the week. Like, they stay, like, that's one of the reasons why I respect Kel's game, like, so much. Like, and it's multiple games too. Like, that he's been solid in. And people forget, I'm like, this man is EVO champion and EVO finalist. He's done all these things. He's won tournaments in so many different games. Like, Street Fighter. He's won in Tekken. He's won in Marvel 2. Like, he's, like, put some respect on my man's name.
Right.
Like, everybody talks about the stick throw. Everybody talks about the salt. Everybody's like, just pick a top chick. Kells is legit. Like, for anybody that, like, if you just see the memes and you never actually see the dude play, watch his matches. Don't just watch the memes. Don't just watch Arcade Hustler.
Yeah. I mean, the memes are one thing that, I'm sorry, Sanford, they're hilarious. I got laughed.
They are funny. I'm sorry,
bro. No disrespect. But watch his gameplay. He's very intelligent, ahead of his time, very smart. Seen him do some amazing reads over these. I really liked Sanford's Oni run.
Sanford's Oni run
was crazy.
I picked that character up and thought I was figuring him out.
Nobody played that character.
Nobody. I thought I was going to figure him out.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to be the one. I'm like, people aren't really paying attention to this character outside of Japan. Right. And I think the best Oni in Japan was at the time was WoW.
WoW. I forgot about WoW.
WoW was crazy. And I remember seeing like the God's Garden footage and all the stuff from like the Japanese Street Fighter 4 channels and the arcade channels coming up. And then I'm seeing Kells pull this stuff off. He's like, yo, I was thinking about Oni. And that was one time, like, I had first met Kells at Summer Jam. It was at Summer Jam. And everybody reading SRK forums, so I was like, oh, Kells is a dick. He's this, he's that. He's assaulting all that. I'm like, I introduced him, like, yo, I'm a big fan of yours. Watch the gameplay and all that stuff. And he was like, he was cool. I watched him play. We played, like, a couple casual sets, and it was nice. And then when he picked up Oni, my entire, like, view of the character changed. So I'm like, oh, so this is what Oni is capable of. Yeah. And it's crazy you mentioned Ricky Ortiz earlier because I always think of that set they played. I think it was Apex 20.
Apex. I was right there in front when I think you were there too. Were you?
I wasn't there yet.
No, you wasn't there, but we were there.
I was traveling, but I wasn't able to go.
All right.
I think this was this Apex 2013 or 2014?
2013, I want to say.
It was 2013. I didn't start traveling to like other stuff, like even like Tri-State until like 2014. I remember watching it, and I remember like
that was 2014.
I remember like that was when what we now know is like the flow state. I think that was one of the first times I had seen it because I'd seen the set go by and it was clean.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't like too many scrambles. It was Kel's doing what he did, recognized the situation, punished accordingly, got his mix-ups, got his throws, and got his damage and everything. And he looks, he's like, all right, he's like, no, that was it. I'm like, what? And he had this look on his face, like he was so locked in. He's like, wait, it's over?
All right.
And I saw that. I'm like, yo, this guy's actually built different.
Yeah, he is. He's built different. I also remember the exhibition run he had, I think at a Summer Jam, when it started with, that's me, guys. What's his name? Aqua Silk. He was talking smack.
Kells versus Aqua Silk, yeah.
You know, and I knew going in as a Geef player, you're not winning this. I love you, Silk. You wasn't winning that.
As a Sagat player, I know he wasn't winning that.
Winning that. You have to be 10 leagues better than Sanford to win that matchup with Geef, because he's so bad in that matchup. And I think, who did he beat after that? He beat another person before challenging Justin Wong, I think. Or was it Justin Wong right after?
So this was, are you talking about the
exhibition? He popped off. He swept Aqua Silk.
This is a winner brawl. This is the one in the Holiday Inn, right?
Yeah. Was it Holiday Inn?
Yeah, it was Holiday Inn.
Yeah.
And then Kells had his exhibition run again at NEC when it was PR Rog and then Justin.
No, that was all the same.
That was all the same?
Yeah, he went back to back.
He went back to back.
I think he called out Rog right after. Called out Rog. They came up.
And then he pointed, and that's when he zoomed in. It was just him going.
And then he pointed for Justin. He was on a roll. Like, he wanted all the smoke that day.
That wasn't a Clarion.
That was a Clarion?
That was a Clarion.
Yeah.
When he called, when it was back to back.
Yeah.
That was a ridiculous night, because I'm like, I've seen him running in Street
and
Fighter
although he lost to Justin, I'm personally going to say that at that point he must have been tired.
He was.
To run sets like that back to back with top players
in 2 different games.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous. Like, just that's something a lot of people don't get to. Like the mental stamina it takes. Like, yes, we're playing games. Fighting games are taxing. Especially if you're one of those, if you're like me and you're hard on yourself and you internalize every wrong decision. Like, even when you shake it off, you're still thinking about it. I could be up 3 rounds. I'm like, I could have had this. Like, I could have been done 30 seconds ago if I didn't miss that punish.
Right, yeah.
Like, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Him going, like, all in and just seeing it. But I'm like, nobody's going to fault somebody for losing to Justin Wong.
No. Especially after playing 2
exactly
high-level players before that.
Especially. But, no, I'm like, at no point, I'm like, if anybody tries to say Kells is washed, you smoking dust. At no point did he look like he was out of it. Like, that's the thing. And that was something that I'm like, everybody has stayed consistent. Like, the bar is so high where it's like, you can't really rest. Like, you can't just be like, okay, I'm good here and stop, because somebody's always going. Even the guys that are at the top that we consider to be the guys of Marvel, they still play.
Right.
And seeing that was like, that was one of the things that reminded me why I play retro games. I'm like, there's still love for this game. There's still passion for it.
And they're still good. There's a reason why they existed in the time they existed. They have a value to them.
We're in the age of being able to play people from across the world even.
Yeah, I've been wanting to play
in a ballroom watching people play Marvel too.
Yeah, I've been wanting to play Ultra 4 lately. I've been having the craving lately. Like, I want to go back and I play Geef, I play Makoto, I play Fei Long.
I have feelings about Fei Long. It was CEO 2014. I don't want to talk about it.
What you ran into, CJ Truth?
I ran into somebody that played like CJ Truth. And then I ran into CJ and he was like, oh no, you gotta do this, that, and like CJ broke it down to me after, and I'm like, I would get this information after I lost. But it's like, I'm fine with this. I'm okay. Him breaking it down actually really helped. And that was the moment, like when I first started traveling, because this was CEO 2014. So I think Ultra had just come out.
Who told you to be traveling at that age, huh? Who gave you permission?
So here's the thing. So this is where we start getting the whole kind of student stuff again.
Okay.
So with me saving up I'd missed out on so many tournaments that I'd wanted to go to, and then I've been watching them for so long. I'd made a deal with my parents. Graduated, and graduation was great because it kind of felt like that culmination, like how everybody feels like when they win a tournament, when they're on stage, they're like, that's how I felt at graduation, because I'm like, everything that I worked for was like right then and there was on display.
Right.
And I pretty much like cleaned house, like National Honor Society 3 years running, got an award, high class honors for grade point average.
You hear this guy?
All of that stuff.
This guy puts in work, so I don't want to hear excuses, man. Okay?
And that's something like I've always valued. Like, even if I like drown in bracket, it happens. Am I gonna like take accountability for it? Yes, but I know that there's other things that I'm good at, and I have to give myself credit on things. But that was one of the things I did. I'm like, I want to travel, I want to compete, I want to do all these things. So like, okay, how would you feel about a tournament being a graduation present? I'm like, because it's just like, yeah, we sport like as long as you get your school, we're done. Like, and then we're talking about like actually like traveling, like going to something, and I'm like, wait, are you serious? I'm like, you playing? And they're like, no. Because, like, at that point, you get to a certain point in the year, it's like, everything's pretty much done. You know you're going to graduate. You know you're going to be done. So we start talking about this in, like, February, March. And I'm still working everything, saving up money. And that was it. And then I find out the real reason. So my parents, being who they are, mom and pop, love them to death. They are, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be doing any of this. They were like, it's not that we don't trust you. It's that, one, we don't trust other people, obviously, but it's also a case of, say if something does happen.
It's parents being
it's parents. You're a minor across state lines. Yeah. So if something happens and you get caught up, it's now completely different. The moment I turned, my birthday's in January. Yeah. So January, I turned 18. I was not grown, but it's like, I'm like, okay, legally.
You're legal adult, but not fully adult.
Not fully adult, but I can travel. I can do more things now. Yeah. And it's like, okay, and like, well, you're grown now. And then I was able to stay over. There was that winter brawl that I stayed at. And I'm like, okay, now you good. Because beforehand, even stuff that was in my city, they wouldn't let me book a room and stay overnight.
Well, technically, it probably didn't make sense. You were in the
city.
Didn't
make sense. I was in the city, but it's like they didn't understand the experience of like, okay, after the bracket, like there's there's matches. Out. Yeah. Stuff might run late.
Like, oh, I gotta go home.
The after bracket food runs, like all of that stuff. Like we were making those at like 8:00 instead of like midnight because I had to leave. Right. But they're like, no, well, you're 18 now. You're actually an adult, so like we're fine with you staying over and stuff. And then that took like the next league. Like we went from being able to stay to like, okay, now you can travel. So I remember it was CEO as my graduation present, and then I'd saved up money to go to Evo.
Was that your first time out of the state?
That was my first time flying to a tournament. Okay. It wasn't my first time out of state. My first time playing out of state tournament. It was still in the area. We went over to Jersey for a local. Okay. But that was my first time like going to like fly to a big major.
How's CEO compared to other events?
I'll be honest, I'd watch CEO and I'm like, okay, like this is a huge production. But then I got there and I'd see people that I'd seen at the tournaments before. So it kind of had it had this weird like all tournaments feel like a family reunion. Right. But then when everything was in full swing, because I got there I think like Thursday. So I think I'm like still like setting up and everything. And then I see they're like building the ring. I don't see it fully. Then Friday hits and everybody's here. And I walk in that ballroom Friday morning and I'm like, because I'm used to looking at it like on stream. You don't get the scale of it when you're looking at it from the stream. And I walked in and I just kind of like, I paused for a second and took everything in. I'm like, yo, like this is really happening. And I kind of like, I had to re-ground myself. I'm like, yo, like relax dog. Like you got to play, like get focused. I didn't. Like, I'm not going to lie. I was still kind of shook. Yeah. But just seeing that, like CEO has like this vibe that's all its own that Jabali is kind of put together. And it's one of those things like being like kind of like the geek that's in a little bit of everything. So seeing like fighting games mixed with pro wrestling,
which we're fans about. We're
big fans of pro wrestling. I'm wearing a pro wrestling hoodie right now. Shout out to Joel to Sleep. Whenever you see stuff like this, it hits different. You're just like, I'm not alone anymore. Like there are people who are not only hype about this, but they get it. They're fully into it. And seeing that, like seeing the ring and people make entrances. CEO is one of those tournaments where it's like, I would tell people if you have the opportunity to go. Like there are certain tournaments where you can say there's generally the same experience. You have your brackets, you have your exhibitions,
but there's little things about
the production, about the people, about how it is the overall vibe of the event, the feel of it, the ethos. Like there's this always like core ethos and like really what they prioritize. And with CEO, it felt like a production. It felt like a show. Where I'm like, am I really here just to like play? Like people are, they're going off. Like people are getting hype. I remember when they had like the cage. It was like it had a vibe all its own. I'm just like, I've seen the competition of fighting games. I've seen it be put on display. CEO was the first time where I felt like I'd seen the spectacle of the community. and like it wasn't just gameplay being put on display. This is where it's like this is where you let your personality out. So I think CEO was kind of like that. It felt like this weird playground in a sense, where it's like if you want like off the wall fun and like even if a guy goes 0-2, but he has like a crazy entrance or something, whenever he gets into the ring, like people are gonna remember that. Like that's why I say like if you have the opportunity to go, like CEO had a vibe like no other, and I wish like I could like replay that experience for the first time over and over again. It was especially with that being like the first major. Like the first like major I traveled to, not really knowing what to expect other than seeing it on stream, like going to Orlando and seeing that, and I'm like, wow. CEO was it's hard to explain. It's one's like if you get the chance,
but
hopefully we can
people,
post COVID. If you get the chance, please experience
you need to go
it.
back, and like I tell people, if you're part of this community and you've never gone to a major, I always have people like Juumani, everybody else talk about the experience as to why you should go. That being said, if you were able to make top 8 and get your entrance, what would you do for your entrance as CEO?
Oh my goodness. I get this question a lot, and I've got it more recently because people started so now I was at Combo Breaker. We were sitting by the pool and I was putting something on Snapchat, and it was like, yo, with the towel on, you look like Samoa Joe. So now everybody's saying I gotta do the Samoa Joe entrance. And don't get me wrong, I thought about it.
Okay, Jew.
See, that's gonna sound different. I don't know if we can get away with that.
Well, I wouldn't call you Joe.
Right. But I think if I had to do it, I don't know. I've had like a couple ideas that I've kind of like been kicking around in my head just because it's something everybody thinks about, whether you feel like you can make top 8 or not. Watching CEO makes you feel like you can make top 8.
You want to think about it.
Because you feel like I want
cool
that
goal.
moment. I want that spotlight. Like this is my time to really like lay everything out. Like I can be me, but I don't necessarily have to be me.
Right.
You know that I can put on this persona. I can put on this public performance that I can play up and all those things. And I think that's the beauty of fighting games. If I had to make my entrance, I would probably do a little bit of a throwback. So when Triple H was doing his heel run, thinking like 99 or 2000, when he didn't use my time, it was the one entrance he'd made where he used the instrumental version, Higher Brain Pattern. I would probably use that.
All right.
Because I think at the time that probably would have fit me best. Right now, I don't know if I'd be able to pull off Aleister Black, but I'd love to try it.
I think you could do it.
I think I could.
Have some guys have the lights out. Have some of us dressed in black so they can't see us. Kind of just lift you up.
I think because of now how long I've been in the scene, I have friends that are willing to do it. Now I'm like, okay, I could probably pull this off. But yeah, it'll probably be definitely Higher Brain Pattern by Triple H or Root of All Evil, Aleister Black.
Nice. Good choices. Just to stay away from ZTC for a bit. On occasion we talk about this from time to time. What's your thoughts on wrestling right now? Being a wrestling fan.
I barely watch it these days, to be honest with you. Like I still have the network because I share it with one of my homies. But a lot of the time, it's so easy for me to tune out. It's like the G1's going on right now with New Japan, and I barely watched it. I think I've seen like
I don't have access to New Japan. I would definitely love to watch like the G1.
I had it. I watched like 2 matches. Like I watched the replay because I couldn't watch it live.
Right.
I watched like 2 matches and been kind of like tuned out to a lot of things. Like now that I have like time to actually sit back and watch it, I still just like kind of don't. I think the product is simultaneously getting better, but I think the industry is in like the business is in the midst of a huge shift, not just because of COVID, but because now everybody has a platform, a streaming platform. You know, they're using Ring of Honor has like Access Fights, Fight TV, AEW with Fight TV, all these things.
The time of TV deals is not needed anymore. Before you needed a big TV distributor. And they still go for it, right? Like AEW has TNT. You know, back in the days, the Monday Night Raw and stuff like that. You know, but then you have again New Japan, which if you're living outside of Japan, you get to watch the streaming service. Yeah,
New Japan World.
Ring of Honor, you mentioned. There's other ones, I think, other smaller indies.
There definitely are. There are a lot of places that do there are a lot of like wrestling companies that like stream on Twitch.
Yeah,
I found that
That's a great move.
Yeah, like House of Hardcore, Tommy Dreamer, they stream on Twitch. Impact streams on Twitch now. I think it's become easier to become a wrestling fan. For me, it became harder because despite the fact that wrestling is like still on TV but away from TV. It's more accessible. The less I watch TV, the less I watch wrestling.
Right. That's where I'm at now in TV in general. Before we used to be glued to our TV because the shows came on a certain time, and you had to watch them at that time. Now with streaming services, I can watch whatever I want, whenever I want. I don't need to be at the TV when it comes on, and I catch up when I catch up. So yeah.
Like I'm not like tuned into like current storylines and all that.
Right.
I've heard like a couple of things just because usually whenever you're scrolling, somebody posts a link, you see it. If there's like a really good match or like some of my favorites are going, like say if like Ricochet had a really good match with such and such, Mustafa Ali did this.
You go back and watch it. Yeah.
Right. Or like when, I think at the time I was like kind of out of it, but when Shane Strickland went to NXT and now he's Swerve Scott, like that I was like, if there's a really good match that I want to see.
They changed his theme song, so I don't like it anymore.
He did.
When he first came into NXT,
they changed it again.
They changed it again, yeah. And it's like, I don't know if it's because of CFO.
I think they're changing all the CFO themes because that's why they changed the Alistair's. That's why they changed Keith Lee's.
It's like, they're horrible.
Yeah,
horrible.
So all of the stuff, like I'll watch stuff like that. So like if I want to catch up on NXT, I will. I haven't caught up in like I'm behind by like months at this point.
I probably wouldn't say this 5 years ago, but the only reason why I'm really watching WWE right now because of Roman Reigns. Like I hear love he's doing what they're doing with him right now.
It's working.
It's dope. It's dope. Like
I might have to check this out.
And I don't know. It's just one of those things. Like it's just if you're a wrestling fan, you tune away for a second. Check out what Roman Reigns has been doing if you haven't figured it out or heard about it. It's really good stuff.
Because even as somebody who considers himself kind of like a smart mark, but not to the point where I'm like, like deprecating about it, or I'm like browbeating. I'm like, oh, this is, I can still get caught up in the spectacle of it. Right. I can still suspend my disbelief for a bit. Like, I like when wrestling is fun. It doesn't take itself too seriously. Right. I like when it does take itself. It's all about balance. Some people are good at, this is larger than life. This is a spectacle. Somebody's like, this is more grounded, where this is a business. But it's not two guys. I'm like, hey, I don't like you. I'm like, I want to be the best. You want to be the best. But at the end of the day, this road ends with like stuff like that, storylines like that. I like. So I've kind of like gotten more into it, but just like it's rare that I'll actually like sit down and watch it like week to week. Like I'll catch up on it like in bits and pieces, but stuff like that, like I can like say, okay, I'll sit down and I'll watch this.
Right, I get that. That's definitely a cool factor on being able to watch TV the way you want to these days.
Yeah,
being in front of it. I know you got things to do today. I don't want to keep you too long. I do have one more thing I want to touch on.
Sure.
We talking about it earlier. How did you use the fighting community to get yourself a paper done in college? Like tell me about that whole story from start to finish.
So whole story from start to finish.
Okay. Well, the short parts.
I'll give you the bullet points. Yeah. So I started thinking about this around my, I want to say, sophomore year, but just kind of like thinking, just kind of like, I wonder what it is I'm gonna do.
What did you do? What are you in college for?
I'm actually an anthropologist. I got my bachelor's in cultural anthropology from Arcadia back in 2018. So that was also another like big year. Like every time I graduate, it's like that's when like I kind of go ham. So like 2014, graduated 2 majors back to back. As a young man, I had the energy to do that. Right. Now I'm a little bit older, not old, but not as young either. And I'm like, there's IRL stuff I got to do. I probably won't do that again unless I'm being paid handsomely for it. But it was just this idea where I think I'd come back from the UK. I'd spent a semester out there. My first semester, fall semester of my junior year, I spent that in the UK, and I had a course called Popular Music Cultures. That I did while I was at the University of Sussex. Also, while I'm speaking about it, shout out to the folks over in Brighton. Met the FGC over there. I'm like, please don't let me have brought my stick across the Atlantic Ocean for nothing. But come to find out, there's a bar they played in, found a local. I still talk to those folks like regularly. I try and do it somewhat regularly, still check in with them, still hit them up, still talk about stuff. But I think it was when I was there, and we had like a term paper that, everybody, you always have a term paper to do. They're not really big on tests in the UK system. It's a lot of papers, especially if you're in anthropology. Right. Anything in anthropology or cultural studies, they're big on papers, they're big on essays. Everyone's like, okay, here's the material. We get that you can say, okay, who did this? Who did that? Can you understand it? And my thing that I decided to do for popular music cultures was discuss ubiquitous music. It's music that you hear everywhere, and I kind of made this argument that you could use fighting game music as sort of ubiquitous music. And the two examples that I gave were the Street Fighter 3 Third Strike soundtrack and some of the mixes that had been done for Street Fighter 4. And I remember talking specifically, it was a remix I'd actually found on YouTube one night. It was Skull Kid's remix. It's called the Love Mix of Beats in My Head by Lane. It's like this Afro beat, you hear the bongos, you hear the djembe, and all this stuff. I'm like, this has a basic 4 on the floor pattern that you would hear. And you could take this, and you could play this in a club. You could play the beep in a club. Remy's Third Strike, and you could play, these are songs that you could play in a club and not many people would catch. I'm like, people in the know obviously be like, wait, I know this, but I'm like, it's fine. Okay, wait, this actually, like, this works. It has all the elements that you would associate with, like, a popular, what they consider a successful club or a dance track. And when I broke that down, my professor, he's like, I didn't expect this. And at the time I did, like an interview over, like, Messenger, just because I wasn't back home. I'd hit up Risey K. And Risey K, for those of you who don't know, he's a music producer, but he samples, like, a lot of video game tracks. So I talked about when he sampled Super Mario World. When he did the track Admiration, he sampled the Game Over theme. And I asked him, like, what is it like? He's like, there's so much sampling that goes on in music, especially in hip-hop and rap music, because a lot of those producers, they are into stuff like this. Like, they were those kids growing up watching Toonami and playing fighting games and all this. So it's like when I heard the Sagat laugh on Groupies on Future's Dirty Sprite 2, I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, you can throw these things in there and make it. It's like fighting games, like the music, but also gaming in general, like, and then they're talking about Del the Funky, Homo Sapien, and Proto Culture.
Okay.
And they're like, this stuff is like, it's almost like we're going back to the 90s where fighting games were everywhere. And I'm like, I'm like, you mind if I quote that? He's like, no, bro, go ahead. And that kind of, I started talking about that because my advisor, Dr. Church, he asked me when I came back. He was like, hey, are you still doing like the fighting game thing? Like, you still competing? Because he knows I was doing that. That was kind of what I got known for on campus, other than generally having a resting angry face. Or I was like, oh, like Juju, like he plays fighting games and all these other things. Yeah. That was what I had known for, because sometimes, like when we did like gaming club, I would have my arcade stick with me, and people were like, what in the world is that? Because there are still people who haven't seen it.
Right.
So he asked if I was still competing. I'm like, yeah. Like I even like ran into a couple locals when I was in Brighton. He's like, have you thought about doing that for a thesis? And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, what's the story of it? And he was like, not just like some like, you know, this guy goes in, here's how he plays, here's the character he's using. He, not match history, not a play-by-play. What's the story? Like, who are the people playing the games? I'm like, wait. And I started thinking about it. So, into my junior year, I started putting together the project, my spring semester. And once we got there, I think, I was originally supposed to start in July. So the summer, everybody says do IRB beforehand, before you actually know what your project is. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people in senior seminar who don't actually know what they're doing until they get there. So if you're doing interviews or anything, you have to go through IRB, you have to get it cleared, you have to get a research certification. Once he said that, I knew what I wanted to do. It was just a case of building it. And I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it for real. And for me, it might be a little bit easier because I'm going to be talking to people in the community. I have that rapport already. Yeah. So I had that insider take on it that I was able to provide. So my research, my undergraduate thesis, my kind of like, I guess magnum opus, you could say at this point, is most undergrad theses are about 35, 40 pages. In April, I turned in a 65-page, with citations and everything, a 65-page behemoth. Wow. On the full title of the project is Cultural Combos.
You wrote a whole medical journal, man.
It's funny you mentioned medical journal. I had to resubmit my IRB and say, hey, because I'm doing interviews on Discord and storing my like interview recordings in Google Drive, it's not HIPAA compliant. I'm like, I'm not getting any health information. I'm like, I know, but because you use the platform, you have to do it. So that was research stuff. Pain in the ass, would never want to do it again.
All right.
But now, kind of since I don't have to, I'm thinking about like doing another, like I want to do a continuation. But it was just an ethnographic narrative of the competitive fighting game community. And the reason why I wanted to single out competitive is people always talk about like fighting games from like a business standpoint, but not really like the people who are playing them, the personalities, the stories, and all these things that come together. And what I loved about anthropology, we find like that truth and beauty and the meaning, and then there's the stories, like the people. We find it in the stuff that often gets overlooked. Sociology deals a lot with numbers and statistics and figuring out demographics, populations and all that, but we don't really necessarily get the whole story.
Right.
Anthropology is about finding the story. Ethnography is about finding the story, building those relationships, and going from, becoming just from an informant to now a confidant. This is somebody who's like, you have a relationship other than just being interviewer or interviewee or researcher and subject or observer and subject. I'm like, okay, these are people I have prior, and now it's on another level because I'm like, it's not that you've shared your experience with me. You helped me build my work,
right?
Just by letting me know what it was like the first time you stepped into a tournament. So that was my thing, like telling the story and being able to make it accessible. That was another thing I had an issue with. Everybody talks about anthropology kind of being this ivory tower. I wanted to change that, not necessarily in breaking. I'm like, okay, if we have a tower, can I build an escalator? Can I build another? How can I make this read, not just be a good paper, not just be a good academic piece, but how can I make this so that somebody else will read it? Somebody else who doesn't know anything about anthropology or fighting games can understand this. Right. So like, because my advisor, he asked me, he's like, I get this, but he always did video game research. Right. So he's been clued into this. Then I go into senior sem where I have my two professors. They're just like, we don't know what any of this is. Like, they can break down race and crime statistics, gender and sexuality studies. That's their, right. That's their wheelhouse.
But because fighting games are so niche.
Fighting games are so niche. Video games in general.
Like, so niche, yeah. And it still is.
It still is. Yeah. Like, she played a little. She has her son, Lucas. She plays with him. Like, she was telling me about how, like, she played MKX and, like, she was a Devora main. Like, before she even knew, like, what are the terms are. She's like, oh, I use her all the time. I'm like, oh, that's your main. She's like, yeah. She's like, what's a main? I'm like, that's, like, your main character who you use. And then we start talking. So I could see the gears turning with her. Other pressure was completely lost.
Right. Not a gamer at all. Did understand.
And I'm like, okay, so I got to break this down even further. So I'm going to have to talk about Street Fighter 4. I'm going to have to talk about why this is so big. I got to talk about the arcades, all of this, and building that narrative from the arcades to prime time. From we were just playing in bodegas, we were playing in pizza shops, laundromats, 7-Elevens, wherever we could find it. And that also ran a narrative that gets overlooked a lot, which is black people and people of color in gaming. And that was something where I'm just like, there's so many angles I can take with this project. There's so many windows I can open. Where for me, I saw it as more than just, I'm going to talk to my friends about fighting games and you'll write a paper on it. But I took it to another level. I'm like, I have a chance to do some damn good work, not just for the community, but for the anthropological community, for the academic community. I can kind of bridge those gaps together. I can bring light to something. Because an issue I had, when people talk about competitive gaming, I hear StarCraft, I hear League of Legends, I hear Counter-Strike, all these big, what they call the big esports games, all on PCs. It wasn't until, and forgive me if I'm rambling here.
No, totally fine.
Forgive me if I'm like getting a little tripped up. It was, trying to remember when we first got DirecTV, because I was watching the World Cyber Games, okay. And then I was watching Championship Gaming Series. Championship Gaming Series was the first time I saw Perfect Legend.
Yeah, they did a lot of DOA.
It was DOA.
Yeah.
That wasn't the only time I saw fighting games like on TV,
right.
Like in competitive, like showing a tournament.
I think DOA was the first thing I ever seen on fighting games on TV.
It was DOA 4. So it was Perfect Legend, Jeremy Black Mamba, EMP Black Mamba, and then Ninja CW, Chris Harris, rest in peace. But that was the first time I saw people like me that looked like me in a competitive gaming atmosphere. Not just as host, not just as talent, but players. Right. So if I'm watching League, if I'm watching StarCraft, I don't see people that look like me.
I was talking with Nisi B. Curtis the other day, and we touched on that because he was a FPS player and he played some Rainbow Six and stuff. And we put out there that those games at the time, especially in the early 2000s, you didn't have a lot of black players on those teams. It was predominantly white players. It's changed a little bit. A little, and not much. Kind of like how we're slowly breaking into hockey. Right. A little bit. But it's getting there. But I can tell you, it was a handful. It's probably like maybe one black kid for every 1,000 white kids that played FPS at the time.
And I got my start with FPS. Kind of like how Yabs got his start when he said he was playing Unreal Tournament.
Yeah.
I was big on Halo Modern Warfare 2, and Tribes 2.
Okay.
So those were like my big games. And also was a benefit of being a kid in cyber school. They send you a computer.
Yeah.
So my work was done. I'm just like, okay, this game's been out for like a couple years. I know it can run this. So I was sitting there before I was playing fighting games. I was playing Tribes 2 and Star Wars Battlefront, and that was like my entrance into like the competitive atmosphere where I saw it being taken more seriously. Did I win any tournaments with that? Not really. I had a couple good performances, but it's like it's stuff that people aren't gonna remember. It's not like really recorded.
Right.
And then when I started playing fighting games, I'm like, oh, there's there's streams, there's archives, there's tournament history, all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when I started taking it more seriously. But as far as like this for the project, it was like we have been overlooked to the point where people think we don't exist. And this was also me kind of like, yo, like I got an opportunity. I'm gonna put it on for my people.
Right.
Like fuck what you telling me to. I'm gonna make this is my project. I'm the one. I put in the work. I'm going out there. I'm doing the interviews. I'm gonna make this the best damn project possible. But my thing is, you're not gonna talk about this without talking about Philly.
Right.
Don't talk about this without talking about New York.
Right.
Don't talk about it without talking about SoCal and Street Fighter National Championships, all of that stuff. Daigo versus Valle, and there's another player I forgot to mention, Alex Valle. Their legendary set at the Alpha 3 World Finals that they had sitting there. I'm like, you are not going to tell the story of fighting games and tell it accurately without talking about the contributions that black and brown people have had. And Asians too. Asian folks too. You're not going to be able to talk about this without the contributions that people of color have had to the scene. There is no scene without them, really.
Yes, agreed.
Like when I tell people, I'm like, we are the heart and soul of the scene. I don't mean that to be arrogant. I'm like, when we talk about the passion, the pop-offs, the personalities, this isn't, everybody's always had that big argument of esports versus grassroots when it came to the FGC. Again, you could do a whole episode just on that.
I sure can.
I told people, I'm like, if you go and you look and you watch this stuff, this is where I saw people that looked like me, that sounded like me, that acted like me. And I don't mean like being wild and crazy. I'm like, they thought they kind of had that swag and they had that accent where I'm just like, these are guys I'll probably see hanging out like in the neighborhood, like, yo, what's good? Like on my way to the store, whatever. Then I've come to find out, you mean to tell me this guy I've been hanging out with, such a... Damn, he's the best. Like, it was like that when I met Demon Hill.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, you're...
Philly legend.
Philly legend. Philly.
Demon
I'm
Hill.
like, wait, you're... Bro, like, we still, to this day, like, East fucking Coast. Like, we say all that shit. You're just like, word, that's great. And, like, we're talking the Xbox Live party.
Yeah.
It's like, that's how I met, like, Kenny, Holland, here, like, all those guys. And I was like, bro, like, we still say that shit. Like, the impact we've had on the culture. You can't talk about fighting games without telling that whole story.
Right.
So to get back on track, the paper was just me saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it well. So I'm going to talk about the history, I'm going to talk about the contributions we've had. And in doing this, the more I got into the research, the deeper I got into the community and being able to form these bonds, not just within fighting games, but also in the academic community. There are some scholars I was able to talk to and kind of get their feedback and use their work. There was Dr. Todd Harper. And that was another big reason why I wanted to do this project. People weren't talking about fighting games like that. His literature was the first one I found. It was a study of digital fighting games. I think it was Practice and Performance of Digital Fighting Games. That was like one of the few things that I found. And that's why I knew I was going to have to do interviews. It was going to have to be in ethnography because trying to find existing literature on the topic, it was difficult. Right. And then what it meant to be black and be a gamer, that's where I read in the work of Dr. Kashana Gray. Shout out Dr. Gray, started following her on Twitter. She followed me back and now we still occasionally talk about a couple things. But I was able to find out how deep this really went. And she talked about in her book, I remember tearing up reading it because it's like, whenever you find something like you can relate to this, it always hits different. Right. She talked about interviewing people who are playing like on Xbox Live and playing popular titles like Halo, Call of Duty, Gears of War, all this stuff. And it was like, what do you hear when you're playing these games? What are the things that people saying to you? And they're like, they're saying the N-word and all these things. They don't even know who I am, even if I'm using the microphone and not.
That's the wildest thing I've ever encountered. Like playing Call of Duty and someone just wildly throwing out the N-word.
Exactly.
And I'm like, there's no way you know who's on the other side.
You don't know who's on the other side of this controller or this screen.
Are you that hateful?
Exactly.
That
And there's like, oh, I'm mad. I don't like this being a heated gamer moment. I don't want it to just be written off as a heated gamer moment.
Right.
And that was another thing. I wanted to change the perception because everybody has this like idea of gamers, of guys who sit at computers for hours a day. I'm like, These are guys I see in the arcade room, like actually talking to each other, being social.
Right.
Fighting games are one of the most social genres there are. You have
Right.
to, if you want to play,
You want to be good, you got to speak.
you
to
got to
people.
go. You got to speak to people. You have to go in person and play. You have to go to an arcade. You got to go to a game center, wherever it is. You got to play other people. And not to say your online warriors can't, but the experience is different.
It's different.
Nothing will ever beat face-to-face competition. It's just like if you want to get good, if you really want to get good and you want to stay, go to your locals. Like I don't mean to be on the whole like support your. Go talk to people.
We stress that all the time here.
Talk to people. Find out. Ask questions. If somebody doesn't want to answer the question, or there's somebody who can.
There's somebody that can
up.
and will.
Like
for, sure.
for as many dickwads as we got in the scene, we have so many good people that are super helpful. Yes. And I've tried to be one of those people because I don't want people to have to go through some of the stuff I had to go through, and I didn't have it as rough as other people. But I don't want you to feel like you're stuck in a sea of information with nowhere to go. I'm gonna tell you. Don't worry about trying to worry about this form or that form. Here's this page you can go to. This is an app that has frame data. Okay, when you do this, this is here. This can show you what your options are outside of this. Hey, this guy has a video that's really good to watch. If you want to ask somebody, instead of just sending people to Discord and they're like, they don't know what to do, I'm like, talk to this person specifically, I want to tell people, so I'm like, we have so many resources. I don't want you to feel like you're getting lost. I think you'd be a much stronger player if you had access and know how to use it. I want to help you. I want to pay it forward. That's all I wanted to do. I wanted to pay it forward with my research, with my gameplay, with helping people out. And thankfully, I was able to do that. So it was a blessing. And just saying, you're not telling this story. I'm going to tell this story. And I'm going to tell it with the people that I grew up with, the people I've seen, and try and do it as accurately as possible. And so far, the reception's been pretty good. So if anything, all I've ever wanted to do is to be able to give something back. And I think with this body of work, I've somewhat been able to do it. Not completely, but to be able to say I've gotten so much from fighting games. I've been able to travel, go to these tournaments, do different things, make friends in damn near every state in the U.S., so many different countries, that I felt like I had to do something. Like I want to represent fighting games in the community well. Because I feel like it's something that's not done, Every time something bad happens, there's an article, but nobody's talking about the donation drives that we do. Nobody talks about the passion that goes in, like, this is why he popped off so hard. These two have been going back and forth in multiple games. This is regional pride. This is years of people being told this is America's game, where you have Filipino champion Cane Blue River. Aren't even from Philly or anywhere close to it. You got a guy from California and a guy from Chile squaring off in Pennsylvania. How is Cane, somebody's not even from this country, the hero of this story? Performance and perception. So I'm like, I'm gonna get deep. We're gonna talk about it. I hope you enjoy the ride and try these games out for yourself. And if anything, I hope you've learned that there's more to fighting games than just hitting buttons. That's all I want to do.
Awesome, man. Awesome. I appreciate your time here today. I'm sure you've taken enough of it. Last thing I'm gonna ask you is to pay it forward with some shout outs.
Shoot, this is actually me alone, because there's so many people think. Obviously, shout out to y'all, shout out to you, KPB, really welcoming me. There's so many people I have to thank. You, Steve Rage, Coach Steve, shout out to Coach Steve, shout out to Andre from Big Techie, Spooky, all those guys that I were able to talk to, not just to put together the project, but just in general that I've chopped it up with. Shout out to Xanos, being one of my best friends in the community, like from this point on. Gil Game, shout out all the New York homies, Philly. We might not be hanging out in person, but as soon as we get back, I am going to be at locals wilding out saying the most out of pocket shit while doing 60-second orbitals. Bet on that. Shout out to the Tekken scene. Philly Tekken is a thing that people had talked about for years, and I never got a chance to see it. And then Tekken 7 happened, and it blew up right in front of my face.
Yeah.
So yeah, like there's a whole lot of list names, and I don't want to get too bogged on going down the list, but just everybody, like, if I've chopped it up with you at a tournament, if we've played, if we've hung out, all these things, like, there's no Maestro, there's damn sure no Ovaltine without any of y'all. Just thank you for, allowing me to be a part of it, and thank you for being along for the ride. I owe fighting games a lot, and fighting games have given a lot to me, so really, thank you all. Hopefully, once all this pandemic foolishness comes around and finishes up, when things are safer, we can all chop it up again in person. Because I miss all of you very, very dearly. Like, without y'all, there is no me. There's no Maestro. There's no award-winning thesis. There's no scholarship.
There's no KPB. There's no Rod Prime.
without
rage.
y'all. There is
Yeah.
no fighting game community without the community.
Right.
I don't care if you're a pot monster, if you go 0-2. It has to happen to somebody. I don't care if you say, well, I'm more of a casual. That's fine. That's what we need. We need people who have passion, who play. Everybody has a spot here. Doesn't matter. Women have a spot. Anybody, whether straight, gay, trans, whatever, non-binary, everybody. And if I don't mean to sound as hostile, but if you are going to try and make it feel like fighting games aren't the spot for people, where they have to hide who they are, we're gonna have some problems.
We're gonna come see you.
We're gonna come see you. You don't want me and Rod to come see you. You don't want that. I told Rod I was gonna play KOF and forgot to play. He had to see me, and I didn't enjoy that. So that's gonna be my way of paying it for it, making sure people stay safe and making this community welcome. I want people to experience the same love I got without having to go through the hardships. Just because I had to struggle coming up, I don't want you to have to struggle. Struggle in bracket. Don't struggle trying to find community. So that's it. Give back. Much love and thank you all. Appreciate it.
Hit us with that social media, man. The Ovaltine Poppy.
You can find me on Twitter at Juju_the Maestro, Instagram Juju_Maestro. Those are really the main socials I use now. I stream on Twitch, Juju the Maestro. It's not too many fighting games these days because I'm broke, boys. I got a single monitor set up. It is what it is. But you can find me playing Destiny, some of the stuff on Fightcade. If you ever have questions, whether it's about fighting game related stuff, if there's anybody that's interested in doing academic work with fighting games, please hit me up. I kind of had to go through the trenches to find stuff, but I could definitely point you in the right direction if it's the stuff you want to cover, discuss how to do an interview, all those things. Let me know. I want to be as helpful as possible. I might have gone 0-2, but the cash award came with that prize for the thesis, so I've made more writing about fighting games than playing them. So I might be the guy to help you out.
That's what's up. Thank you, man.
Thank
so
you,
much.
man. Appreciate you.
Guys, we'll take care. See you soon. Thank you for watching KPBCast. This is Rodimus Prime. Until next time, stay good.
Drink your Ovaltine.
This has been a KPB Media Works production.